I drove 2 hours to get to my brother's baby shower, the one I'd quietly paid $11,500 to put together, and got stopped in the parking lot. My sister-in-law stepped outside when she spotted my car pulling in. She had on a pale pink dress that matched the balloons I could see through the glass lobby doors, and she crossed her arms before she even reached me. The look on her face wasn't surprise. It wasn't confusion. She'd known I was coming, and she'd come outside to stop me before I got to the door. "Today isn't really a good day for you to be here," she said. I thought I'd misheard her. The words didn't land right. "What?" She glanced back at the lobby like she was checking to see if anyone was watching. "Your mom mentioned that you usually keep your distance from family stuff. I just think it might be better if you came another time." My mother told her that. My mother said I keep my distance. I was still trying to process it when the lobby door opened and my mother walked out. She was wearing her silver blouse, the one she saves for occasions. She took one look at me standing there, holding the gift bag, a hand-painted keepsake box with my nephew's name on it, and her expression went flat. "Phoebe." She said my name like a period, not a greeting. "What's going on?" I asked. She didn't lower her voice. There were women visible just inside the doors. My aunt, a neighbor I recognized, 2 women I didn't know, and my mother stood in front of me in full view of all of them and said, "You weren't invited to this event. I think it's best if you head back." I heard someone inside go quiet. I looked at the gift in my hands. I looked at my mother. I looked at my sister-in-law, who had found something very interesting to study on the concrete ground. I put the gift back in my car. I didn't leave it. I didn't hand it off. I walked back across that parking lot, opened my car door, set the box carefully in the back seat, and drove out without a word. I found a coffee shop about 2 miles away. I ordered a black coffee, sat down at a corner table, and opened my phone and my laptop. Over the next hour and 40 minutes, I canceled approximately $79,000 in financial support I had been quietly providing to my family for the past 2.5 years. By the time I drove back to Chicago, I had 44 missed calls. I should back up. My name is Phoebe. I'm 33. I own a digital marketing agency in Chicago with 19 employees, and last year we crossed 7 figures in revenue for the first time. I grew up in a suburb outside Indianapolis, the second of 2 children, and from the time I was a teenager I understood, without anyone ever saying it directly, that I was the one who didn't quite fit. My brother, who is 4 years older than me, was the kind of kid who made sense to my parents. He played sports. He was easy. He became a high school football coach after college, which in the town where we're from is about as respected a profession as you can have. He married his college girlfriend 3 years ago. They bought a house 8 minutes from my parents. They have a vegetable garden and go to the same church my parents have attended for 30 years. Then there was me. I left Indiana the month after I graduated college. I got a job at a small marketing firm in Chicago, hated working for someone else, spent 18 months saving every dollar I could, and quit to start my own business at 26. The first 2 years were brutal in ways I still don't have full words for. I worked from my apartment in a neighborhood I could barely afford. I went months without a full night of sleep. I lost a client who represented 40% of my revenue in the same week my car broke down. I figured it out anyway. My parents were not unkind about it, exactly. They were something more subtle than unkind. They were worried in a way that never quite turned into belief. Every time I came home, they would ask questions dressed up as concern but shaped like doubt. Is the business stable yet? Have you thought about what you'd do if it didn't work out? Your brother and his wife are talking about starting a family. Isn't that wonderful? I learned to keep my answers short. I learned to change the subject. The dynamic never really shifted even after the business started doing well. At family dinners, my parents would talk about my brother's coaching record, his team's playoff run, the community fundraiser his school was doing. They talked about my sister-in-law's second-grade classroom and the projects she did with her kids. Me, they'd mention in passing, Phoebe does marketing, for businesses online, in a way that made it sound like a hobby that had gotten a little out of hand. No title. No context. Just a vague gesture in my direction before the conversation moved on. About 2.5 years ago, my father had a health scare. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but he had to cut his hours significantly, and between the medical bills and the reduced income, my parents were quietly struggling. My father would never say that directly. My mother mentioned it once, almost offhandedly, and then immediately changed the subject when she saw I'd registered it. I didn't make a big announcement. I didn't sit them down and offer help in a way that would have required them to acknowledge they needed it. I talked to my accountant, set up a monthly transfer of $2,600 into my parents' joint account, and had it labeled in the memo field as family fund. I told my mother privately what I was doing. I asked her not to make it a thing. She said she wouldn't. When my brother and his wife announced they were expecting, I heard about it the same way I heard about most things, secondhand, through my mother on a Sunday phone call. When the pregnancy was confirmed, I sent flowers and a card. When they found out it was a boy, I sent a gift card to a baby store and called to congratulate them. 4 months into the pregnancy, my sister-in-law mentioned to my mother that they were hoping to have a big shower but were watching their budget. I knew the family account had the monthly transfers I'd been sending. I called my mother and said, I wanted to put in a specific amount toward the event. $11,500, transferred directly to the joint account designated for the shower. My mother could coordinate everything, keep it simple. No one needed to know where the money came from. I thought I was being generous. Looking back, I think I was also being naive about what it means to help people who have quietly decided, on some level, that you don't fully count. The morning of the shower, I woke up genuinely excited. That's the part I keep coming back to. I wasn't going reluctantly. I wasn't bracing for it to be difficult. I wanted to be there. I drove to a boutique the afternoon before and picked out the gift myself. A hand-painted wooden keepsake box with my nephew's name in navy blue letters. The kind of thing you keep on a shelf forever. I had it wrapped. I got on the road at 7 in the morning to make the drive with time to spare. I hadn't received a formal invitation, but I'd assumed that was an oversight. I'm immediate family. It never occurred to me that this absence of an invitation was intentional. The Oakmont Suites in my parents' suburb has a banquet room my mother has always liked. High ceilings, natural light. The kind of space that photographs well. When I pulled into the lot and saw the entrance decorated with pale pink and white balloons, little paper stars hanging from the awning, I felt something warm settle in my chest. This was a big day. I wanted to be part of it. You already know what happened next. What I haven't described is the moment right after my mother said, "You weren't invited," and I turned around. I walked back across that parking lot with my chin up and my steps even, because I was not going to let my family watch me fall apart in a public parking lot. Not in front of my aunt, who'd watched me grow up, not in front of neighbors who'd known me since I was 12 years old. I made it to my car. I put the box in the back seat with careful, deliberate movements. I sat in the driver's seat and pulled the door shut. Then I sat there for about 90 seconds staring at the brick exterior of that hotel. I thought about the 2-hour drive. I thought about the gift I'd chosen so carefully. I thought about the way I'd actually looked forward to holding my nephew for the first time. And then, underneath all of that, the slow, terrible math of what my mother had actually said. Out loud, in a parking lot, in front of other people. To her own daughter. You weren't invited. Not a miscommunication, not an oversight, a choice. I started the car. I drove to the coffee shop, and then I got to work. I'm not proud of how organized I was about it, but I was very organized. My first call was to my accountant. I've been with him for 6 years, and he manages all my business and personal finances. I explained what had happened in about 4 sentences. He didn't need more context. I told him I needed all transfers to my parents' joint account to stop immediately, including the standing monthly transfer. He said he'd handle it by end of business. Next, I called the event coordinator at the Oakmont. I told her I was one of the contributors to the Hartley baby shower event currently in progress, and that I needed to notify her that the contribution I'd committed to was the full extent of my support. Any remaining invoices or gratuity balances beyond what had already been processed were not my responsibility. She sounded uncomfortable. I gave her the name of whoever was listed as the primary host and said she'd want to follow up with them directly. I thanked her and hung up. The other arrangements took less time. The medical supplement I'd been quietly adding to my parents' account. Cancelled. The quarterly home fund contribution I'd set up for my brother and his wife, with one final installment of $17,000 due. In January, I contacted the financial institution and revoked the authorization. I went down the list with the same energy I'd use closing out a client contract. Methodical, clear, final. I sat in that coffee shop until my first cup was empty, and then I ordered another one. The woman behind the counter asked if I was all right. I said yes. I'm not sure either of us believed it. Total canceled or withdrawn. $79,400. Not counting the future monthly transfers that would simply stop appearing. I finished my coffee. I drove home to Chicago. I did not answer my phone. The voicemails came in waves. The first round, within 2 hours, was logistical. My mother, my father, my sister-in-law, all trying to reach me after the event coordinator apparently made some calls. My father's voicemail was measured. There seemed to be some confusion about an account. Could I call him back? My mother's was less measured. She said she didn't understand what I was trying to do, that it was a special day. That this wasn't the time or the place. By evening, the tone had shifted. My mother was crying on the third message. My father sounded genuinely shaken. There was talk of a credit card being charged, a remaining balance on the venue they hadn't anticipated. My brother called 6 times. He didn't leave a voicemail until the 4th attempt. He said, "Phoebe, I don't know what's happening. Mom told me you couldn't make it today. I'm getting confusing information about some payment. Please call me back." I didn't call anyone back that night. At 9:47, someone knocked on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole. My brother was standing in the hallway in the same khaki pants he'd worn to the shower. He'd driven 2 hours. His hair was the way it gets when he's been running his hand through it for a while. I opened the door. He looked at me the way he used to when we were kids and one of us had gotten hurt. That expression that sits somewhere between worry and guilt. He started to say something, stopped, and then just said, "Can I come in?" I made coffee. We sat at my kitchen table. He told me what he knew. He'd gotten a call from my sister-in-law mid-shower about a billing issue. Then a call from my father. Then he'd spent the rest of the afternoon trying to reach me before eventually getting in his car. "Mom told me you weren't coming today," he said. "She told me 2 weeks ago that you had something going on with work and you'd see the baby when they came home from the hospital." I looked at him steadily. "She told you that?" I didn't question it. He said it like he already understood what that meant. Should I have questioned it? I opened my laptop. I showed him everything. 22 months of monthly deposits into our parents' account, the invoice from the Oakmont showing the transfer designated for the shower, the authorization I'd set up for the home fund, the vehicle payoff from a year and a half before. I walked him through each one without editorializing. Just the documents. He didn't say anything for a long time. "Why didn't you tell me?" he finally asked, not accusatory, just genuinely lost. "Because I wanted to help without conditions. Because I thought eventually it would matter. I had no idea any of this was happening." He said it quietly, like a fact he was still processing. "I know you didn't." I believed him. We talked until past midnight. He kept coming back to the same place. He hadn't known about the money, hadn't known I wasn't invited, had taken our mother at her word in the way he'd been taking her at her word his entire life. He was 37 years old, and he'd just found out he'd been lied to, and the look on his face was something I recognized because I'd felt it myself, many times, in many different rooms. The specific grief of realizing that the family you thought you had and the family you actually have are not the same thing. He did not ask me to restart the payments. He said, "I should have called more. I should have paid attention." He meant it. I could tell by the way he said it, quiet and certain, without making it about himself. "Yeah," I said, "you should have." My mother asked to meet the next day. We chose a diner off the interstate near Rensselaer, halfway between Chicago and Indianapolis, a place neither of us had any attachment to. She was there before me. She had coffee. She looked like she hadn't slept. She started by saying she hadn't meant for things to go the way they did. I waited. She said my sister-in-law had expressed over the course of the pregnancy That she felt a little intimidated around me. That she felt like I had a way of making other people feel small without meaning to. That she'd told my mother she was worried about that dynamic at the shower. And you agreed to leave me off the guest list, I said. I thought it would be simpler. Simpler. I let the words sit there on the table between us. The rest came out in pieces. The way confessions do. When someone is simultaneously telling the truth and managing how much truth to tell. Over the past year and a half, my mother had been quietly, consistently building a particular story for my sister-in-law. That I was busy with my business. That I wasn't really interested in family events. That I tended to keep to myself. 100 small comments. None of them true. All of them stacking into a version of me that made it easy to leave my name off a guest list without anyone asking questions. Why? I asked. She looked at her coffee cup for a long moment. I think it was easier when things were harder for you, she said. When you were struggling, I knew how to be your mother. I knew what you needed. She stopped. Started again. When you started doing well, really doing well, I didn't know what to do with that. You didn't need anything from me, and I told myself that meant you didn't need any of us. So you made it true, I said. You told people I wasn't interested, and then I wasn't invited, and then I wasn't there. She didn't argue with that. You used my money to pay for a shower I wasn't invited to, I said. I didn't say it with heat, just plainly, the way you state a thing that happened. She looked up. She had the grace to look ashamed. I didn't think of it that way at the time, she said. I know, that's part of the problem. We sat there for a while longer. She said she was sorry more than once. I believed that she meant it, and I also knew that meaning it didn't undo any of it. Before I got up to leave, I said, I'm not restarting the payments, that's not on the table. She nodded. And I need you to stop telling people a story about me that you wrote yourself. If you don't want me at something, tell me directly. Don't tell me you're proud of me and then erase me when I'm not looking. She said she understood. My father called a few days later. He told me he'd known about the money from the beginning. That my mother had told him that he'd been grateful. That he was sorry he'd never said so directly. He told me he had seen the invitation list before the shower. He'd noticed my name wasn't on it. He hadn't said a word. Why not? I asked. There was a pause. Because your mother said she'd handle it, and I've been letting her handle the kids for 30 years because it was easier. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to me. I know, I said. I did not restore the payments. My parents adjusted. They sold the boat they'd bought 2 summers before. My father picked up part-time work. They made it work in the way people make things work when they finally have to, which is to say they figured it out without me. That's not cruelty. That's just what happens. It's when the arrangement you've been in stops being sustainable, and you stop pretending otherwise. My brother and I talk most Sundays now. Real conversations. His team, my clients, the years we spent not really knowing each other while living the same family holidays. It's slow and sometimes awkward, and I think it might eventually become something worth keeping. I met my nephew for the first time 6 weeks after the shower, at my brother's house, just the 4 of us. He's a good baby. He has my brother's ears. I held him for about 20 minutes, and I didn't feel the need to perform anything for anyone, and that felt like the most normal I'd felt at a family gathering in years. My relationship with my mother is not repaired. It's recalibrated. There's a honesty between us now that wasn't there before. And honesty is uncomfortable when you've spent 30 years building something on softer ground. But I'd rather have the discomfort than the version of closeness we had before, where she was telling her daughter-in-law that I preferred not to be included while I was wiring money into the family account every month. I think about that parking lot sometimes. The way the pink balloons looked through the glass, the way my mother said my name like it was the end of a sentence. I think about the choice I made to put the gift back in my car. That one moment felt like every other choice I'd been afraid to make for 30 years, compressed into about 10 seconds. I didn't leave it. I didn't hand it over to people who'd just told me, in front of witnesses, that I didn't belong there. I put it in my back seat. I walked away. I didn't leave anything behind that I'd have to regret. If you're the person in your family who gives without it being acknowledged, who shows up and still somehow gets left off the list. I want you to hear this. Your worth doesn't live in their version of you. It doesn't live in whether you were invited. It doesn't require their recognition to be real. You're allowed to put the gift back in the car. You're allowed to drive away. And you're allowed to stop quietly funding the family that left you standing in the parking lot. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to Winter Revenge for more stories about real people drawing real lines. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you, especially if you've ever had to make a choice like this one. And if someone in your life needs to hear this today, share it with them. Thank you for being here.